At 3:15 a.m. deep inside Russia, a swarm of 34 Ukrainian drones is screaming towards its target at 300 miles per hour. In 45 seconds, they will strike the heart of Russia's air strategy, its largest Shahed drone factory, a production line churning out dozens of attack drones daily. For weeks, Russia had celebrated the Valuyki factory as a symbol of its industrial might. They believed their defenses, a layered network of Nebo-M and Pantsir-S1 systems, were a formidable layered defense system. They were so confident, Russian commanders reportedly held barbecues outside the facility to celebrate record production numbers. What they didn't know was that for 3 months, Ukrainian intelligence had been studying them. Analyzing over 2,000 hours of satellite imagery, they found a single critical flaw. The inexperienced night shift crew manning the Pantsir battery had a habit of dismissing small, low-altitude radar returns as migrating birds. The plan was audacious. Wait for the foggiest night of the month, fly low, and masquerade as birds. The stakes were immense. Success meant crippling 70% of Russia's Shahed production, effectively blinding their air strategy for months. Failure meant the loss of a $2 million drone swarm and a humiliating propaganda victory for Moscow. But just as the plan was finalized, Ukrainian intelligence received a terrifying update. Russia had just reinforced the facility with a new mobile 96L6E radar system, manned by a veteran crew, with orders to shoot down anything that moved. So how do you penetrate a steel fortress when its one known weakness has just been patched? At 3:17 a.m., 60 miles from the border inside a cramped mobile command vehicle, Ukrainian operators began the attack. Bathed in the cold glow of their FPV monitors, they worked in perfect sync, their commands echoing through the headsets. Swarm is live. Go, go, go. First came the killers. 34 Ram 2X drones lifted into the night, immediately dropping to 100 feet and using the thick Belgorod fog as a natural cloak. But they weren't flying straight for the target. They were the second act of this play. The first act was all about misdirection. 10 British-built Banshee Jet 80-plus drones screamed into the air, climbing high and broadcasting a massive simulated radar signature 1, identical to a squadron of Su-27 fighter jets. It's the oldest trick in the book: make the enemy look left while you attack from the right. This symphony of chaos was conducted by a custom-built AI called Night Owl. It processed real-time data from an RQ-20 Puma reconnaissance drone circling invisibly at 15,000 feet, factoring in the 15-mile-per-hour crosswinds and adjusting the flight path of every single drone in the swarm. The human element was critical. The operators weren't just passengers. They were the pilots ready to take manual control at a moment's notice. Angle 15, watch the radar bloom. One operator called out his hands tight on the controls. The clock was now ticking. The swarm had exactly 7 minutes to cross the kill zone and reach the factory before the veteran Russian crew could distinguish the real threat from the phantom jets. At 3:19 a.m., the bait was taken. Inside the Russian command bunker, the veteran commander saw exactly what the Ukrainians wanted him to see: 10 Su-27 fighter jets screaming towards his position on his main tactical display. He didn't hesitate. "Engage all primary targets," he barked into the radio. "Light them up." The Pantsir-S1 system roared to life. In less than 30 seconds, a volley of missiles blasted 6 of the Banshee decoys from the sky in spectacular fireballs. On the screen, inbound threats were being eliminated with ruthless efficiency. The Russian crew was performing flawlessly. The commander issued rapid orders, confident in his system's dominance. He thought he was playing Call of Duty on easy mode, swatting down a clumsy Ukrainian air raid. But this was a calculated sacrifice. Inside the Ukrainian command vehicle, the operators watched the icons or their decoy drones blink out one by one. Their job was done. They had bought the main swarm 30 precious seconds of chaos. But the easy part was over. The Russian commander, smelling blood, wasn't celebrating. He was hunting. With the phantom jets gone, he ordered his operators to scan all frequencies, all altitudes. He knew something was still out there. The element of surprise was gone. The main swarm of Ram 2X drones now had less than 5 minutes to reach the factory before a highly alert veteran crew found them. At 3:21 a.m., the Russian commander was furious. He knew he'd been tricked. Now his veteran crew was sweeping the sky with everything they had. The remaining 28 Ram 2X drones were about to be exposed and annihilated. But the Night Owl AI had already anticipated this. It initiated a new tactic, Phantom Echo. It didn't try to hide the drones, it disguised them. The swarm instantly broke into 3 smaller erratic groups. Their flight software, using biological data sourced from the Belgorod forests, began to mimic the exact flight patterns of large migrating birds. To the junior Russian crew, now manning the primary Panzer console, The hard-threatening target icons dissolved into soft, non-threatening biological returns. Simultaneously, 15,000 feet above, the RQ-20 Puma dropped a single specialized IR decoy. This wasn't meant to fool a missile. It was meant to blind the Panzer's ground-based optical cameras. The decoy's intense flare was scattered by the thick fog, creating a blinding whiteout on the Russian operator's visual screen. The fog, which was supposed to be Russia's ally, was now a weapon turned against them. Inside the Ukrainian van, an operator shouted, "They're blind! Push through the gap now!" They were exploiting a 15-second window of confusion they had discovered during surveillance, the brief moment of inefficiency during the 3:10 a.m. shift change. For a moment, it worked. The junior crew, overwhelmed and disoriented, reported the sky was clear. But the veteran commander wasn't looking at the main screen. He was watching the raw data feed on his new 96LL6E backup radar. This system was more sensitive, designed to find needles in a haystack. He saw past the deception. He saw the wolves hiding among the sheep, and he was about to unleash hell. At 3:22 a.m., the veteran commander simply refused to play their game. It was like a mastered chess player ignoring a pawn sacrifice to look directly at the moves ahead. On his backup 96LL6E radar, he drew a box around the fuzzy biological returns and manually designated them as hostile. He then fed that raw targeting data directly to the Panzer missile launchers. The response was brutal and instantaneous. 4 SA-22 missiles erupted from their tubes, each one accelerating to a blistering 4,000 feet per second. Their seekers locked onto the 12 designated drones. But just as the Ukrainian operators prepared to initiate their pre-planned evasive maneuvers, a new unforeseen enemy attacked the sky itself. A vicious 25 mm/hour wind shear ripped through the formation. On their FPV screens, the horizon suddenly tilted violently. The AI fought to compensate, but the force was too abrupt. 3 of the drones, unable to correct in time, were slammed into each other. They didn't just crash, they vaporized in a trio of mid-air fireballs. Red warning lights screamed across the operator's consoles as 3 icons simply blinked out of existence. And the worst part? The 4 incoming missiles were still screaming towards them. They were now fighting a war on 2 fronts against Russian steel in the air and the raw, unpredictable power of nature from below. Over the Russian command channel, the commander's voice crackled with triumphant laughter. "They're out of tricks," he declared. He was right. They had run out of planned responses. With nearly half of their remaining strike force about to be wiped from the sky, the mission was hanging by a single fraying thread. At 3:23 a.m., with 4 missiles seconds from impact, the mission was over. The plan had failed. The AI had run out of pre-calculated solutions. This was now in the hands of the operators. But they still had one last desperate card to play a piece of borrowed American genius. Each Ram-2X was retrofitted with a miniaturized AL-050 decoy, the same system used to protect F-16 fighter jets. It's not just a flare, it's an electronic lie. It screams a radar and thermal signature 100 times bigger and juicier than the drone itself. It's the Matador waving a giant red cape at a charging bull. As the operators mashed the deploy button, 4 decoys unspooled behind the targeted drones. The 4 SA-22s, locked onto what they thought was an easy kill, suddenly saw a much more attractive target. Their internal logic made an instantaneous fatal decision. They swerved violently chasing the phantom signals and detonated harmlessly 1,000 feet away in 4 massive, empty fireballs. Over the Russian command channel, the triumphant laughter had turned to stunned, furious silence. He was no longer a hunter, he was now a spectator to a massacre. With the final threat eliminated, the Ukrainian operators issued their last command. The swarm broke into 3 designated attack groups, 1 for the main assembly workshop, 1 for the component warehouse, and 1 for the central control building. And the Night Owl AI, in a final act of brilliant opportunism, used the very same 25-mile-per-hour wind shear that had almost destroyed them as a tailwind, accelerating the remaining drones for their final attack run. Every Russian defense had been broken. Every trick had been countered. The path to the factory was now wide open. The final command from the Ukrainian operators wasn't a shout. It was a cold, quiet confirmation. Weapons free, send it. The remaining 31 Ram-2X drones executed their final attack profiles. They didn't just fall, they became precision-guided, their INS GPS systems locking onto the factory's coordinates with a margin of error of just 3 feet. The first drone's 15-pound shaped charge didn't just hit the roof of the main assembly workshop. It pierced it, punching through 6 inches of reinforced steel and detonating directly above the primary Shahed 136 production line. One by one, the rest of the swarm followed. striking the component warehouse and the central control building in a perfectly synchronized, devastating rhythm. But the real genius wasn't in the strike itself, it was in the science of the explosion. The fuse on each warhead was set with a 0.8-second delay. This was critical. It was designed to maximize the pressure wave within an enclosed space. It's the difference between a firecracker going off in an open field versus one going off inside a steel drum. The result was a catastrophic 30,000 psi pressure wave that slammed outwards, shredding every delicate electronic component and circuit board within a 50-foot radius. The steel support columns, designed to hold up a roof, not withstand a coordinated internal blast, buckled like tin cans. The entire roof collapsed inwards, burying over 200 nearly completed Shahed drones under tons of twisted metal and concrete. In the control center, the secondary blast fried every server. 3 months of production data, logistics schedules, and schematics were wiped clean in less than a second. Russia's prize drone factory was no longer a factory. It was a tomb of scrap metal. Maybe they could sell it to buy their commander a new radar screen. Air raid sirens blared across Valuyki, but it was too late. The damage was done. On the ground, chaos erupted as FSB agents swarmed the area, desperately trying to contain a disaster they could no longer hide. A 1,000-foot-tall column of black smoke rose into the dawn sky, a giant tombstone marking the grave of Russia's drone ambitions. The numbers coming in were catastrophic. 70% of the entire production line gone, 15 of Russia's top drone engineers, and 30 workers eliminated. At 4 a.m., a satellite pass confirmed the kill. The images showed a gaping 20-foot deep crater where the main assembly workshop used to be. The mission wasn't just a success, it was an annihilation. But the real damage wasn't measured in twisted steel. It was measured in the strategic shockwave that rippled across the entire Russian war effort. This wasn't just a raid, it was a decapitation strike. First, the production pipeline that fed Russia's eyes in the sky was severed. Russian units in Donetsk, who relied on a constant stream of those Shaheds for reconnaissance, were now flying blind. This created a terrifying pattern for the Russian command. Just weeks after the Windweaver Cascade attack crippled their power grid in the Volga, this strike proved that none of their high-value strategic assets were safe. The Ukrainians were no longer just defending. They were reaching hundreds of miles into Russia and systematically dismantling their war machine piece by piece. While Moscow was scrambling, paralyzed by indecision and trying to figure out how they had been hit so deep, Ukraine exploited the 72-hour window of confusion, launching 5 new offensives in the Kharkiv sector. In the Kremlin, the question wasn't just about a destroyed factory. It was a commander reportedly screaming in a secure briefing, "How do they keep getting here?" That night, with a handful of drones and a brilliant plan, Ukraine proved a fundamental truth of modern warfare: victory doesn't belong to the one with the biggest army, but to the one with the sharpest mind. The Russians learned the painful lesson: never challenge the Ukrainian drone corps to a game of chess, especially when they've had their coffee. If you support this kind of battlefield genius, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. And now for the strategists watching, what was the critical mistake the Russian commander made? Was it underestimating the decoys, or relying too much on his new radar? Drop your analysis in the comments, and let us know what you want to see next. A breakdown of the Ram 2X drone, or an analysis of the British Banshee decoys, the most requested topic wins.